And for that, I think we have a good definition as part of generic statistical information model. And it says that it's a set of observations or records which are pertaining to individual statistical unit. So that could be a person like me, and my microdata, so about myself, are actually in our databases in Statistics Netherlands because we use registers, but can be also companies and stuff like that. And here is the first problem that we came upon, which is that in the macro world, we often talk about population and statistical units, but what we really need for modeling is so-called unit type, or in some standards it's called object type, which actually defines that something is defined as a company or something is defined as a household. And at the moment, so this is well defined in the GSIM, but it doesn't appear in SDMX glossary, and also doesn't appear that there is a grid way how to store information about this object type in SDMX standard. So the second thing here is the difference how we define dimensions and primary keys in macro versus micro world. So at the bottom you have a very kind of simple and typical macro DSD or macro table, which has 3 dimensions and population count as a measure, very easy to define and document. Now, if we go one step back and look at the table that was used as a source to aggregate that population count, you can see that first, we are not sure what is now dimension here or what is measure. And the second thing is that we have a primary key defined in a different way. So in the macro world, the primary key is usually a combination of dimensions, while in the microdata world, in that case, would be we use pseudonymized person ID, which has two fields, but doesn't matter, could be one field. But it is not, it is not defined the same way as dimension, but it's very important because it's the source for the next challenge, which is how to model relationships. Here is just the summary of modeling challenges related to concepts. I will not go through them, but I will go now to the relationships, so the second area that I want to cover. And in terms of relationships, I will use another practical example that we have, which is a survey on foreign subsidiaries. So we have two objects. One is company, one is foreign subsidiary, and we can see there is a relationship, one-to-many relationship between the company and foreign subsidiary that we can resolve via primary and foreign key. This is very important for querying because we would like to know, I don't know, the data for subsidiaries only, or if I go to another example, households only. And at the moment, it is difficult to record the metadata about these relationships. Okay, so there are another couple of challenges. I would like to also mention the second one, which is actually opportunity. So if we manage to solve this, we could also describe structural data transformations such as micro to macro aggregations with the metadata, which would really help with our kind of process. Finally, the presentation level. So again, I mentioned Sentinel values, but I will not go into that example. But there are also some specific differences with the way how classifications are used in the kind of macro data world. So usually in the macro data sets, you would pre-aggregate all classification of hierarchical, all classification levels of hierarchical classification. So everything is kind of prepared and it's easy. Now, in case of micro data sets, what we usually do is we only use data, or we only store data in the data set for the most detailed level of classification. So it will be the 4-digit level for ICD-10 that I'm showing here. And everything else is open, so you can aggregate ad hoc. So this, you can think about this as a schema on read versus schema on write. So micro data sets are still flexible to be used in all sorts of different ways, but that has sometimes challenges how to document them. Okay, so modeling challenges for this part are listed here again, so you can watch them later. And yeah, with that, I would like to pass to Daniel for solutions.
The slide on? Sorry? The slides?
The slides.
They should be. Now they're there. So we solved the first problem. The slides are visible now. Yeah, this morning I created a lot of problems and Antonio solved them, and now I got a lot of problems, but I didn't have to solve them alone. So I'm speaking here on behalf of the cross-working group of microdata and STMX. We are working now on a guideline for microdata modeling. Quite a while now, and I must say we have some progress and some achievements that I want to present today, and still work ahead of us that I want to show you. So not everything is solved yet. I can start with the good news. We can do it. And I will go a bit in detail how. And if you're interested, we can also speak later about even more detail, because I think I also have only 8 minutes, and it will take about 8 hours to 8 days to explain the whole background. To start quickly, so what was the objective? We wanted to have a seamless standard-based exchange of microdata, but not only the exchange was the trigger, but also like also mentioned by the colleagues before from Spain and Netherlands, actually the internal modeling of microdata is even more relevant in that case, so that the exchange later on becomes efficient, to be interoperable across organizations, because we all have solved the microdata problems in our organizations, but once we hit the community, it's very difficult to be interoperable. So this is of course the mission of STMX. And looking at STMX as a standard for any data. With STMX3, we made this promise. We said, okay, we are onboarding now microdata. Already last year in the experts group, we discussed it, but now we had to kind of prove it with real use cases. So the objective is to deliver a guideline on microdata modeling, which is the first part of the journey, to start with the data models. I can already tell you what will not solve a lot of the implementation challenges that come after the modeling. We will continue working on that, of course, and there we rely also on you to collect good examples. But what we have started was real-world use cases, so we did not start from a clean sheet. Matthias has explained some of the challenges from CBS. We collected from there, and from many other organizations. We simply collected use cases and said, what's your problem? And we tried then to map it to STMX. In some cases, we could solve it directly, so we said, okay, you can use multi-measures, you can use this or that feature that was there, but in some cases it's more difficult, and we focus on those. There is not 100% coverage. We had this promise in STMX 3.1, 2.3, but we still have some gaps that we find now when we want to practically use it. And we identified some issues. A lot of them are terminology, where we simply don't understand a feature because we call it differently, but also then in tools or in the standard itself. None of the gaps so far were blocking, so we can continue the work, but we needed to use workarounds or additional explanations that we will give in the paper. We have a very broad participation from central banks, statistical institutes, international organizations, so we believe we have a good base on which we draft the paper, but we will also tell you then once the paper will be kind of published, or we don't know the exact process yet, we will publish a draft probably quite soon, but then it is to challenge that paper with your real use cases as well, so that we can spread the word, and then maybe we can invite INER and we can invite CBS to really put it to the test and tell us if there's still remaining problems we didn't capture. What we're also doing is, so thanks to BIS, we have a Fusion registry where we are constantly working. If you scan the QR code, you will get the instance of STMX.io, and under the agency CWG Micro, you find the examples. They will change every day right now because we are working on the paper. But also if you look at what I'm presenting, or if you look at the challenges we have as STMX artifacts that are sometimes incomplete, that are sometimes not working, but this is part of us solving, but you can also follow the work through that. So looking at what will come out in the guideline, we have basically now structured the guideline in 3 chapters, a step-by-step modeling guide. And this week we reduced the 8 steps to 7, so it got even simpler, so the slide is already outdated. We agreed on Monday that we will have 7 steps. We will still see if they are enough, but let's say it's a bit below 10. Let's keep it that way. And above 3, steps to successfully model any kind of microdata domain, but some of these steps also linked into macro, like micro-macro linking was one of the challenges, so they are included in the steps. And then the challenges chapter would be a kind of how to solve a specific problem and then point to the steps or point to the STMX solutions. And the annex then listing the issues and then the categorization of issues using a traffic light system to say, okay, is it a real gap? Do we need to solve something in STMX? And then we give it, Edgardo is sitting here in front, we'll just hand it to him or to the technical working group in that case. Edgardo was working on collecting these gaps and then documenting them for the technical working group to look into then solutions in the standard. Or we have workarounds, and workaround possible would mean we document the workaround and we'll use it and we don't need to solve the problem beneath because we are happy with it. Or we use the workaround temporarily until the standard changes. We categorize that, and all good, meaning it's a challenge because maybe people didn't understand STMX or didn't understand terminology, but we can explain it and we explain it in the guideline and the problem is solved in a green light. So when we look at the steps itself, I mean, you will recognize a lot of the words that Matthias has used in his presentation, right? So we go sequentially through. In a real project, modeling project, you might have some iterations and step back, step and forth, but there's a logical sequence. It's like to identify the entities. And that now I'm using modeling language, let's say, a generic modeling language, not even STMX language, because we needed to solve the terminology problem first. And we have a chapter where then we compare the terminology, where we say an entity in modeling is roughly a statistical unit in statistics, is roughly a concept or a category in STMX. We're still looking at the exact representations, but basically we go then through identifying what entities are there. And you could see actually, before I was very interested in Spain, you went through the journey a couple of times. And maybe when we throw our paper at your problem, maybe we can speed it up and capture these lessons learned. Then once you have the entities, you identify them. So it would be in our world dimensions, but in the microdata world, we heard before primary keys. So how can you identify the entities? How you can distinguish them? Then building the entity relationships. So how do they relate to each other? How does a household relate to a person, for instance? What variables are you collecting about the entities? Then the representation of those, so data types, code lists, and so on. And then you have the model more or less done, but then you talk about the transformation relationships, which is a different type of relationship that we also need to document. And then finally, we talk about data exchange and reference the metadata, which is something more classic. So we kind of now merged this step 7 and 8 in our latest draft. So that's why it says 8 steps here. In the latest draft, we have 7. We are still looking into that because the step 7 and 8 are more classic STMX that we need to explain, but not microdata specific. So challenges, I told already, the good news is we didn't find a blocking issue so far. The main discussion actually, and it took us a lot of meetings to discuss terminology. We have put now a table together that we are working on as part of the paper. We'll put it in the annex most probably to simply compare terms and also on the terms then to show, is it a real problem? So does the term mean the same? Or is it simply to understand the STMX term and then translate it to your world and simply use it, even if it doesn't sound intuitive, you can use it and it's working. So also in the terminology, we then give a mapping between the terms high level, but enough then to finalize the modeling and understand the model. So some examples we got from Matthias before, like what is the difference between dimension primary key? In the model, they look the same, but in reality, they mean something completely different. Or what types of relationships do we have? Or what is one of the challenges we heard from Spain before? What is an attribute? What is a measure? Why is it what? And how can I decide? Yeah, so to summarize, we are working now on the guidelines. We are based it on real world use cases, but we can never have enough. So it's also then for you as a community, if you follow our work a bit, once we have a draft paper available, we would ask also you to try use it, to give us your use cases. We have discussed to put complete use cases into the paper, but that will take too long. So our idea currently is that we will then have white papers where really the guidelines are applied in these use cases that we would do after the guidelines are published. So we'll throw it back to CBS to solve their problem with the paper. We'll throw it back to some of the other members in the group then to issue kind of annexes or site white papers that we can publish later to say this is how it's used in practice. So we have done now the documentation of the use cases, the documentation of the challenges, the documentation of the gaps. We are now writing the guideline up, doing formatting, doing text. It's also not so simple, but we have a draft. We consult it in the group. We'll consult it with the community once it's ready. This is the current phase. And then once that is done, we throw the paper back to the technical working group. We throw the paper back to the statistical working group to maybe work on additional guidelines that are missing, to correct guidelines from the past that are not anymore relevant or correct, and then maybe also to solve some technical problems in the information model. This is the work going forward, I think, which will happen after the cross-working group is finished, then to give it back then again to the community to work with it. So with that, thank you very much, and back to the chair.
Thanks very much, Daniel. You got through some amount there. So take a break after those 8 minutes. I think just in regards to the three presentations there on microdata, we really see real collaboration in action there. You know, different use cases, but similar core problems, and the different people working together to come to solutions. So it's very, very positive. The last presentation in this set of presentations today is relating to a maturity model for SDMX adoption. And I suppose after all the presentations this week, it might be a question you might have for your own institution or for yourselves, where you are in terms of SDMX adoption. So really looking forward to this one. So David, take it away when you're ready.
Okay, thank you, and thank you everyone. So this is a presentation on the maturity model for SDMX adoption. And it's produced by a task force that is working on, looking at how to implement SDMX at the enterprise level, so a kind of strategical level. So I haven't got a slide that lists the working, the task force members, but Petra, she's our chair, so thanks a lot, Petra. But there's several of us here that are in this task force. So the problem statement. So I guess the first problem is that I'm the last presentation, and even on the the handout, you may not see that there is another presentation because I'm in the next page. But here goes. So SDMX adopters, they want to achieve the best value for money and interoperability and integration when they adopt SDMX for certain use cases. Okay, so we really went with a use case driven approach rather than just saying, okay, the use case is to implement SDMX, because that's never really the use case. We want to save money or something like that. However, for this, there's very little reference material, or maybe there's no reference material. So how to do it is in some of our heads, but I think it's in some of our heads quite differently as well. So at least in this task force, it allowed people who have experience of this to actually talk through the issues and agree. But so the main goal is to list what we perceive as common use cases, but to agree on the best practices and approaches, and to produce a maturity model, which is what I'm going to show. But it's not the only thing coming from the task force. Okay, there's I guess the working name is this cookbook to see, to describe the detail in the maturity model and how to implement, and other things to do with a strategical approach. Abdullah mentioned enterprise modeling, things like that. Okay, so the goals of the maturity model itself. So you can use it to ascertain an agency's readiness to implement certain use cases, which I'm going to come to. Okay, so the idea is here, maybe think again if you want to try to solve a use case, but you haven't done such and such, because it may take you a very long time, or you may just be kind of wasting money or something. Also, know where to focus resources and effort to actually best implement these use cases. In a certain extent, know what to do at a strategical level. And I guess to a lesser extent, if you want to measure your agency's maturity in SDMX implementation, you can use it as kind of scorecard. So yeah, when I say agency, I mean it in a very generic sense. So whether you're an organization or an agency or a company or whatever. So just to speed through some of the main use cases, but these are not all these are not all the use cases, right? But and we're going from a very low to a kind of high. So maybe the lowest end, you just want to you have some data and you want to convert it to SDMX for providing to an international organization. Okay, so, you know, because they're hassling you to give them something in SDMX format, or maybe they're forcing you to do it. So yeah, you know, you use a tool to do this, and usually it's very low complexity. You know, you're not talking about any modeling or harmonization here, we're just simply converting data to SDMX. And then next thing is something like, you know, using a tool to just to validate some data and to look at it. Okay, this is again very low. All right. Also, then going up in complexity. Now you're going to create a DSD. Okay, so you got some data. You're going to create a DSD for it. This needs certain things to be in place, you know, for you to succeed in doing that. Publishing data via APIs, another kind of level again. Collecting data and reusing it. Okay, thank you. Yeah, and going up, so you know, improving management of structural metadata, harmonizing data. Again, now we're getting really into quite complex things. It says medium there, but I know that this is actually quite complex. So, and then yeah, integrating your statistical production. Okay, now we're getting even more kind of you know, costly and time-bound things. And yeah, on the last end, it's like integrating AI. I think we put this as last one because it's still a kind of unknown country, right? So it's very much a kind of moving target. So we split the maturity model into certain dimensions. We grouped it into 2 groups. So you got, like, on the one hand, like business institutional setting, things like executive support. You know, making sure that you have the executive management funding and sign off to do these things. You have IT resources. You have a communication and capacity building behind the implementation. Things like structural metadata governance. And then on the other side, you have the data architecture dimensions, such as structural modeling, harmonization, which is actually different to modeling, right? I mean, you may like model everything, but not harmonize it. IT knowledge, tools knowledge, and processes and workflow. So certainly not going to read all of this out, but then, so those were the dimensions, right? And these are the actual maturity levels. So on the one hand, you've got initial awareness, which are things like just a few people are like aware of SDMX in the first place. Management may just not be aware, or just okay, thanks. Or essentially, yeah, have very little kind of involvement in it. Pre-implementation, so people have started to become aware, and analysis has started, etc. Early implementation, so you've done some things in production, but it's not kind of corporate wide. Corporate implementation, yeah, okay, so it's used throughout the company, but there's maybe some silos like remaining, and then mature is like, okay, now everything is kind of done, and you have like a full funding and etc. So what we did is, like, we took the use cases here in the rows and we mapped it to the maturity, to the dimensions. And we said in each cell, what is the level of maturity that is required. So you can see for basic data set publication, which is the least complex, you know, everything is initial apart from tools expertise. So you need some tools expertise to ascertain which tools you're going to use to actually do this, right? And the same thing for local data viewer and validator. But then we go up to something like publish harmonized data sets. And now you start to have a spread of things where your structural modeling needs to be mature, and harmonization is corporate. So it's just like one step down, but you need to be at the corporate level before you actually try to harmonize your data sets. But you're probably thinking, well, what the hell does that mean? But then you have to look at the detail in the maturity model. Yeah, thanks. So here we come to like just a couple of use cases I tried to kind of sketch out. So using a standard to structure data. So we're still at like the early complexity stage. And yeah, a lot of text, I'm sorry about that, but I did what I could. So we can see that to use a standard like SDMX to structure the data, then you at least have to have some senior managers being aware of the SDMX benefits, right? It's no good like starting to do this and you got just like no backing from management. And there needs to be like an estimation of resources. So that's pre-implementation, sorry. So, and looking at the structural modeling dimension. So, yeah, I mean, you need some stuff like knowing how to structure data, right? I mean, all this sounds obvious maybe, but, you don't want to start to structure data when people have like, no structural modeling expertise. And then looking at something like about IT resources, well, maybe you don't need so many IT resources, right? This is like structural modeling is more on the kind of subject matter side. So we put that into initial. So, but then looking at something like published harmonized data sets, which is like a medium complexity, but actually quite a lot of complexity, then to publish harmonized data sets, then the governance has to be mature. Why? Because it's very difficult to harmonize data sets with no notion or little notion of how you're actually going to like look after those data sets after you've done it. Okay, you have to know who's going to be responsible for what, and this really should be decided before you harmonize your data sets. Okay. Yeah, just one other thing here, and then tools expertise. Yeah, you need to know which tools you're going to use for the harmonization, and things have to scale in IT resources, things like that. So yeah, sorry, I haven't got time to kind of read more of this and to discuss it, but yeah, that's what it looks like. So this is my final slide. So some questions as a kind of conclusion. So how do I implement these details, right? Like executive support, etc. Well, there'll be like supporting material to the maturity model to show how to do this. Okay, the maturity model stays at a very high level and just tells you, like what kind of like situation you need to be in. And when can you use the maturity model? Well, we aim to publish it at the end of this year, all being well. I mean, it's still at a draft stage. Okay, so the things that I've shown still kind of in flux. And how does my agency score? Well, yeah, that's very interesting. So you're welcome to have a look at the maturity model and maybe do this analysis. But the main aim is to see how to implement the use cases in the best way possible. Value for money, etc. And just a final point, now when we have the maturity model, we need to communicate on it really, because a lot of effort has gone into this. Maybe I'm biased, but I think it's very useful. But I just hope that when we publish it, then it actually becomes visible, so people can actually refer to it. So we need to do it in a good way. So yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Thanks, David. The previous chair spoke about keeping people from coffee. I'm really conscious that keeping them from their lunch might be even less popular. But I'll open it up for 2 questions if there's 2 questions. Yeah, great.
Eric Anvar from OECD. I have a question for Alicia. Could you explain in a way the goal you're pursuing? Your data is available already in DDI, so why would you remodel it in SDMX? So Just perhaps I didn't misunderstood.
We did a proof of concept with Retail Trade Index in DDI Life Cycle 3.0, and we repeated the same proof of concept with the same, Retail Trade Index survey. They are neither, none of them are already in production in those standards. They're only proof of concepts to put one just next to each other and see the comparison.
Yes, very quick question, but let's say a strategic question. Investing a lot in 2.1, and for the next 2 years to invest in terms of tools, do we have to move step by step, invest in 3.0, 3.1, or directly jump to 3.1, or wait 3.2?
You happy to take them out, or?
Thank you. I mean, that's a good question. So 3.0, I think, was an example of quite a large release, right? Because there's a long period of time between 2.1 and 3.0. So 3.0 is a really good starting point. And we're seeing the features implemented in the tools like the FMR with semantic versioning and DSDs with multiple measures and things like this. But these point releases, 3.1, 3.2, they're kind of identifying specific use cases like horizontally complex DSDs, specific use case. In 3.2, we're looking at custom structures for things like presentational metadata. So really the decision starts to become, does this actually satisfy needs that we have within our organizations? But we're seeing this start to be rolled out into the tools like the metadata repositories. So then the question becomes more, perhaps, how do we then use these features in our user interfaces, or how do we use it in our data warehousing? And that becomes a...
Yes, if I can add very quickly, look at your use case and make a decision. If your use case is reporting of highly multidimensional data sets, then yeah, wait for 3.1. Does it make sense to go for 3.0? If your use case is dissemination and you already have clean data structure definitions that would benefit from, let's say, codeless inheritance, then there's no need to wait for 3.1. So it should be a practical decision.
One single addition, 3.0 changed the way of modeling data. So it's a really, let's say, tough decision to move to 3.0, but necessary. But it will have effects on the way that you model your data. 3.1, 3.2 add features that you may need it or not. But in any case, tools will incorporate these features and it will be adding, but will not change the way that you model your data or the way that you use SDMX. If you don't need, don't put that, but if you don't need to add more dimensions horizontally, or you don't need, you will not be affected by incorporating 3.1 or 3.2. But changing to 3.0 is let's say, backwards incompatible change. And this is why it is 3 major versions and not a minor change.
So we'll take one last question. Yeah.
So the last presentation talking about the maturity levels and maturity models. So I don't find any convergence between these two because the versions are keep on changing the maturity, because the first level itself, we have to convince the top management once we reach a level of maturity, then where the version stands. Then again, we have to think of the another version. So how the convergence? That's my question.
So sorry. I mean, so if the question is like, how do you get the the buy-in from the senior management. Yeah, the maturity model itself doesn't tell you that. Yeah, this will be the supporting material. Now, we have something on that from the task force, but we're still kind of finalizing it. So I hope that this will be something that will be produced as part of the task force, you know, in the kind of implementing estimates at the enterprise level. Okay, but we haven't got that yet. So we haven't published it yet. Is that okay? If not, we can discuss it outside, you know, because I think we're out of time. So
Thanks, David. I'm conscious Raphael wants to give a few quick updates, but before he does, I'd just like to applaud the members of the presentation.
So for the capacity building, there were still a few people who asked, can I join? Can I switch the room? So Yamil and Jonathan, they will be at the registration desk. Please, if you want to change something or you want to join, they will tell you how many we can actually accept in addition. In addition, maybe you can just move one slide back. We were actually spinning up a new Wi-Fi here because of the Slido issues we had yesterday. So that's a new Wi-Fi connection. This is should only be used from your mobile for the upcoming Slidos. We have actually 3 in the pipeline in the afternoon. If you don't manage this, we will show it again later. So please, I give you just 10 seconds to click that. So maybe 20 seconds. If you don't manage to connect, then at the registration desk, the colleagues also have the password. So you just go to the registration desk. Okay, so I see most people connected, so we can move to the next slide. So this is another QR code. This is again for the registration for the SDMX lab, because still we see that not all of you have actually created an account, and this is a prerequisite for the capacity training. So you see on the left side, there are a few instructions, and on the right side, you can actually get directly to the registration. So take a picture of the slide or the QR code now. And if there are any issues, again, at the registration desk, you will get support. Now, just as a heads up, we will change a little bit the timing in the afternoon because we have one presentation less. So we thought actually that we do the panel discussion right after the session after lunch. So we move the coffee break right to the end, and then with the finish of the coffee break, basically the conference is finished. So the coffee break will be around 4 o'clock. So just as a heads up already for you, that you know there will be some changes. So there was a question whether for the capacity training you need a computer and laptop. The answer is yes. And then just for the secretariat members, there will be a meeting of the secretariat at 1 o'clock in the room next here. So then enjoy the lunch.